Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages,
prepare to be astonished.
Hey, welcome to the Young Prophets Podcast. My name's Justin Allen. I'll be your host today. Behind the scenes, over here to my left, I've got my good friend John Rolfe mixing it up in the house.
We're here in the studio today making it happen.
It's going to happen.
We're trying.
It's going to be so awesome. We've had more kickback on this particular episode than any episode that we have ever done.
That's true.
But it's going to happen because the Lord's on it. I am beyond excited and super stoked to have a new friend of mine, a prophetic voice to this nation and the nations around the world. I'm very excited to have Jeremiah Johnson on the broadcast. Jeremiah, welcome, man. Thank you so much for coming on today. How are you doing, man?
Good, Justin. Thanks so much for having me on. It's good to be with you all today.
Yeah, man. Are you in Florida right now?
I am. I'm in Lakeland, Florida, right here.
Nice. Lakeland, Florida. We're in central Pennsylvania right now, and I think it's probably about as humid here as it is there right now. We've been getting tons of rain and all that good stuff. Reminds me of South Florida in the summers. I grew up over in Fort Myers, a little ways away from you, not too far. So I'm excited to have you on, man. Would you start by maybe introducing yourself a little bit? Tell us what you would want us to know about you for those that are just getting introduced right now on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of my prophetic journey started in the womb. My mom had a dream when she was pregnant with me to name me Jeremiah, and that there would be great complications that would mark my birth. And so I was actually born dead in the hospital, a 10-pound baby, cord wrapped around my neck. The doctors rushed in, miraculously revived me, saved her life, a pretty traumatic entrance into the world. So kind of maybe from the womb had that same call that you read in Jeremiah 1, kind of felt that destiny on me.
Okay.
My parents pastored a large charismatic church in Indianapolis, Indiana for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Was really blessed to grow up in an environment that welcomed and really desired my gifts to grow. I have a huge heart for younger prophetic folks, teenagers, adolescents. A lot of the parents that I talk to, I feel squash the gifts that their kids have because they think they're weird, they're a little out there. I was definitely that kind of interesting prophetic kid where people would show up to the church and tell my dad, someone has a prophetic word here for me. And they would say, it's that little 9-year-old boy, Jeremiah. And so really, really grateful for my parents. My dad was very eclectic. His philosophy was embrace Jesus wherever you find him. Oh, and so he would regularly take trips to Redding, California with Bill Johnson. We'd take trips to International House of Prayer. I always laugh and say my dad's revelation of a good family vacation was going to Kansas City and for 2 weeks. So we'd go out there. We've been around Randy Clark for years, loved Morning Star, Rick Joyner. So that's helpful for people to know about me because people are always asking me, what camp are you from? Mm-hmm. What stream do you flow in? I really tell people I've been molded and shaped by them all. Super desiring to learn, hungry to grow. And so really grew up in that environment. Ended up going down to Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida, which is where I am now. Met my wife, graduated. God kind of did this, thing on me where he said, hey, you're going to plant a church. I cried my eyes out that I ever wanted to do, kind of growing up watching parents do the ministry. So, just out of our living room with a word from God, no money, no people, in 2000 planted Father Ministry here in Lakeland. We will celebrate our 8-year anniversary this September. God has literally done amazing things. We were in 6 buildings in 6 years.
Wow.
And last year we bought a multi-million-dollar building down here, have a tremendous growing community, the power of God, the prophetic, just out on the street. So that was in 2010. And then finally, I'll say in 2013, I was in my office 5 years ago, just studying for a message and just felt the glory of God come into my office. And all I heard was, I'm sending you.
Wow.
And literally overnight, the Lord began to open up doors around the nation and the nations of the earth. So I've been pastoring full time, planted the church in 2010 for 8 years now. But the last 5, I have been kind of doing this dual thing where I'm here full time. We've got a great staff, but I've done over 150,000 miles in the air the last 5 years, about 40 churches and conferences a year. So the schedule, the call, the burden, I would say I'm unique in the sense of the Lord told me He's raising up prophetic shepherds.
Yeah, wow.
I think a lot of times, you have your prophets and then you have your pastors, where I've much feel like the Lord has called me to champion kind of this local church, a regional gathering, but also the prophet thing. I want to see prophets and church leaders work together. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, man, that's crazy. That intrigues me too, because being exposed to Global Awakening, having the opportunity to travel with Randy around the world, and some of the things that have been extended to me, I've been introduced to different expressions of the fivefold office than I had seen initially. I used to think, oh, well, you pick one thing and you stick with it, and I found out you don't pick it anyways. The Lord kind of chooses that for you, and you grow into it. But there is in maturity and in that process too, you start to realize that there are more aspects to your destiny than you realize. I love that you're talking about prophetic shepherding, because in my experience, people like, you're either prophetic or you're pastoral. You're not both. There's no way you could be both. Is that possible? And I love that you're doing that, what you're establishing. That's super cool. Man, there's going to be so many things so many rabbits I want to chase in this. I'm going to try to stick probably to some of the stuff. But inside of that, it's probably a good place to segue into Reformation. Like, there's something about what the Lord is doing in the earth, in society, in the 7 mountains. But one of those mountains is the church and the mountain of religion, if you will, organized religion. In the area of Reformation, I hear you speak about it. It's something that's on the lips of most leaders in the church right now. What is Reformation to you, and how is it best introduced in your sphere of influence? So what does that mean to you, and what are your thoughts on that? I'm sure you've got some. Yeah.
I mean, I think that, I could answer this a lot of different ways. I think that, maybe establishing the difference between revival and reformation, where I think revival is more centered on people, where I think reformation is more centered on structures, systems, beliefs, legislating change outside the church, more than I think that revival is oftentimes centered in more of a church context, reviving what's dead, where reformation, I think, is igniting. So I think in the church world, a lot of the reformation that's coming, I believe, is through team ministry. Yeah. You mentioned it before. I believe that we're going to see apostles, prophets, teachers, pastors, and evangelists work together for the equipping of the saints. I know down here in Lakeland, we have a team leadership team, not only me, but other men that are on the team with me. You're talking weekly preaching rotation, counseling, discipleship. There's not one guy that's doing everything. Yeah. And we feel like when you remove the set man, the only man that's left is Jesus.
That's good.
And so I think the reformation of the church is more of a Jesus-centered team ministry, equipping of the saints. And then for me, a lot of my life, Lou Engle said, pay attention to your tears because they point to your destiny. Yeah. And I know for me, a lot of the tears that I cry in the secret place is for the prophetic movement. Yeah. I'm believing for reformation in the prophetic movement. And I think that we are out of balance, where I believe that there's been an overemphasis on positive, uplifting prophecy, maybe focusing on certain aspects of who God is, His goodness, His kindness, to the extent where we no longer receive His severity. Yeah. And so what I see Reformation coming in the prophetic movement is more of a counterbalance. Yep. more of a revelation, a Genesis to Revelation, a Romans 11:22, behold the kindness and severity of God. So that's kind of the Reformation, is more of purity, more full counsel of God. That's what I believe is coming to the prophetic movement specifically.
That's good. I love what you said there. We just left Birmingham, Alabama. I was there with Randy and Todd White and Heidi Baker, Dina Van Hol, Tom Jones, a bunch of those people. And the theme of that particular conference and that gathering was exactly what you were speaking of. And some, like one of the things that entertained me, and I just kind of got a kick out of when I came from cessationist, conservative, like Baptist roots into the charismatic, is like, prophetic people don't get along, and apostolic people, they, like, everybody has an opinion about things, but they would rarely work together. What I'm starting to see is a lot of people who are maybe different flavors or different expressions, or you would pin them as the token this person, like the token grace person or the token missions person. They are preaching this message with great passion and fire of pure devotion, holiness, works, and grace, and all of it. Can it all be possible? I think it is. And I think that for one of the problems is that you can't preach the entire gospel in 55 minutes. Like it's great. You can get elements of it, but to gravitate towards one, we tend to gravitate towards what we love. But man, Todd White is preaching this fiery purity and holiness. Heidi Baker is preaching this fiery purity and holiness. Dina is doing the same. Randy's doing the same. And some of these emerging voices are saying, yes, you can operate in both. The works of Jesus, yeah, it's miracles, signs, and wonders, but he was holy also. Go and sin no more wasn't a suggestion. It was, like, you're healed now. You don't have to be in bondage to that any longer. And this revelation of literally the same works of Jesus and greater, and that does apply to holiness, sanctification, not being entangled by, habitual sin and stuff like that. So I love that you're speaking to that, and we'll get into that probably in a little bit as well on a deeper level. But I love that because I come from a word background, and then I came into kind of more Church of God, Word of Faith a little bit, which was a little more like lay the hammer down, let's bring the battle axe. And then I moved over into where I am now with Global Awakening, and it's a lot of vineyard streams and a lot of more charismatic things, and it's almost like people in the prophetic pick one or the other, and I'm of the opinion that it's both and, because God can't be dumbed down to the box that we put him in. I'm going to ask a different question here. How do you see, because one of the goals of this podcast is to display the diversity of the gifts. So I'll have you on here. I'll have some people that are radically different. I'll have people in media, entertainment, all of that. What do you see as the common denominator and the key to connect all expressions of the prophetic in unity going towards the same thing? And what does that look like to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I appreciate your heart. One of my heart aches has been maybe those who are not making room for those that have a different revelation, a different perspective. And again, I kind of go back to my roots, very eclectic, being exposed to different movements, different graces. I think we need more of that. And I think, just to answer your question straight on, I think we need maturity. Yeah. I think it takes mature people to be able to disagree with someone and not demonize them.
That's really good.
I think what you're seeing is it's like, unless we 100% agree on every T being, cross and I being out, we can't get along. And so maybe just sharing a dream real quickly that I had just a couple months ago. I had a dream where I was in California, and it was a meeting between Bill Johnson and David Wilkerson.
Oh, wow.
And Bill Johnson had a T-shirt that said the goodness of God, and David Wilkerson had a T-shirt that said the severity of God. Mm-hmm. And they were actually embracing one another. Wow. Again, kind of those, what we're talking about, the different spectrums, Bill with the goodness, the kindness of God. Wilkerson was one of those severity, kind of judgment, kind of type prophets, although he did pastor as well. But they were being married together. And the Lord said to me in the dream, he said, you are about to witness this generation, both the dirge and dance simultaneously. And when he said that, the dirge and the dance being taken from Matthew 11, you have the dirge is more of that call to mourn, to weep, to repent, that call to dance, the joy of the Lord, the kindness and goodness. And the Lord said, they're both going to be played. And I immediately said to the Lord, it's going to require a very mature people to be able to, in one meeting, like you said, only 55 minutes, hear someone preach on the severity of God, the whole, you better get right. and in the very next session, someone's talking about the grace and the mercy of the Lord. And so I'm really hungry for what we're talking about. I'm hungry for maturity. And I think the body in some places is immature. So I'm believing for cross-pollination. I'm believing for some of these conferences and these gatherings where you have people that, again, they might have some disagreements, but hey, let's make room for the dirge and the dance. Let's make room for the goodness and the severity to come together.
Man, I love that. That's so good. And I believe it is happening too. We always talk about prophetic types. We're always looking 5 years ahead of where we're at, and that's okay too. But I do celebrate what's happening. I remember before I had even moved from Tennessee to here, when the Lord was telling us, probably 5 or 6 years ago, the Lord started to speak to me about, I'm going to bring a convergence of the streams together very, very clearly. And I saw people that would never minister together, like just wouldn't be on the same docket. And I'm like, Lord, what are you doing? He's like, it's everything. I need all hands on deck. And he's like, you haven't even tapped into the fullness of who I am. And it's like each person carries a facet of the personhood of the Godhead. It's like they have this revelation, and it is God, but it's not the full revelation. And as we're seeing this happen now, I was really impressed. Michael Koulianos is one of the guys that is kind of leading the charge in this, and even we have been crossing over and having people from radical different streams. And it's not always been because we didn't want it. It's just been because it was almost like ministerial suicide to minister with certain people sometimes. But I think people are actually getting the heart of the Lord, and now we're recognizing, and I even think in the midst of all of this, that there is this element and thread of reconciliation. I believe that one of the markers of this is going to be that ministers who have legitimately fallen and messed up, but gone through the process of repentance, I believe the Lord is going to restore them and then some, just to show that He's better than the obstacles thrown in the way. Now, you need to give place for restoration and getting whole and families being made well and all that, but I think the ministry of contrition is really important, and if we bypass the process, we never really bypass the process. So one way or another, we'll go through it. But I do believe that the ability, the capacity, the heart of God to turn a situation that was meant for evil for good is always a superior thing. So I think that's really cool, man. Thank you for speaking into that. That's killer. And I love this too, because we're shifting also away from, and everything has its place too. So I'm not anti-conference. I'm not anti-event. I'm not anti-local church. I'm pro all of those things. But historically, people generally tend to lean towards one or the other. And that's what I love about what you're doing is you are local church and you are national, international prophetic ministry and apostolic ministry. So it's these hybrids, for lack of a better word. I'm speaking to a lot of these emerging guys. It's like, yeah, I do have a heart to plant churches and be a pastor and a missionary and go speak at the events. But I think what I'm seeing is that it's less relegated to certain areas, and it's actually a family. So as we're developing this, we're seeing the idea of family in ministry, and not necessarily like like in the 70s when you'd have a traveling family band. That's not what I'm talking about. But the people that you minister being with your tribe and your family put on display. How do you personally manage your personal family, your wife, your children? You've got a few kids, I do too, and you're doing a lot of stuff. So how do you keep that in check? Because that's central. But then also accountability and relationships within ministry and your ministry family, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most needed or necessary question in this generation of emerging ministers, because I do believe in family. I believe our greatest ministry is our marriage, is our kids. And I think that there are a lot of emergents, if you will, that we're exposed to fathers and mothers who maybe hungered for revival, maybe extended meetings, the miraculous, more than they hungered to see God transform their own families and marriages. And so I think up out of that ache, you're seeing a next generation of men and women that walk in power, they walk in authority. But, I here in Lakeland, just to speak to our own thing, we're trying to redefine even revival as healthy marriages.
Yeah, come on.
Revival as investing in your family. We ask the presence of God to move in church meetings. What about asking the presence of God to move in your home?
Come on.
So here, for me, one of the most asked questions I get is, how do you do family? Because people know how busy that I am. And I think, my three things are, and I'd start off by saying this: nowhere in the Bible does it say God, family, and church. And honestly, that messes with people's theology. When you hear that, God, family, church. When you look back, especially in the Old Testament, they did three things: they ate together, they worshiped together, and they warred together.
Come on.
So I kind of have a concept of not family in ministry, but family in ministry, not and. So all together. So for me, again, I'm a big local church guy. I think one of the areas that the prophetic movement needs reformation is messengers being planted in local communities.
So good.
And it's not even so much for them, it's for their families.
Yes,
a lot of these guys that go out, their wife, their kids, there's no girlfriends for their wives, there's no friends for the kids. So I think being planted in some type of family is really important. I think spiritual fathers and mothers, having those voices in your life that can check you, that can say, hey, I don't think your marriage is where it needs to be, and you're going here and you're going there. I think you need to slow it down. So I know for us personally, it's being planted in a community. It's the elders, it's the spiritual fathers speaking into our lives, kind of investigating our marriage and kids. And then thirdly, it's for me has been seasons of shutting down my travel altogether and just going into a time of prayer, fasting, family oriented, just knowing what gear to be in, I think is really important. My kids don't need prophet or apostle Jeremiah. My kids need Jeremiah.
That's good.
I'm so thankful, Justin, for a wife who always tells me, I don't care how anointed you are. I don't care about whatever. I just want you to love me and the kids. Yeah. That's been so awesome and so great for me.
Oh, I love that. That's super good. I love that you mentioned the importance of knowing what gear to be in. And there is this drive and this almost an unspoken rule or this driving force when you begin to move in ministry on a certain level or with a certain level of visibility, and invitations start coming and people start wanting that to come. It's easy to figure out your yeses and nos when you have a few options. It's more challenging when you have a lot of options. And is this good? Is this God? Or is this just a secondary thing? And even to the importance for young prophetic types, like the prophetic spirit and maturity and character is forged in the secret place alone. Like it'll be tested in the public place, but it's forged in the secret. And I see sometimes in ministers that are young and in this similar spaces that we're in, they forget the importance of just sometimes you need to retreat into the Lord. The name of the Lord is a strong tower that the righteous run into and they're saved. And the Lord has done this thing with me every so often where it's like he'll give me everything that was in my heart and then he'll ask for me to lay it all down and almost make a decision that seems rash, almost make a decision that seems like I'm intentionally trying to self-destruct, but it's actually him testing my faith and his ability to put me where he wants me to be, and it's like if you were given the whole world at your fingertips and you could preach and prophesy and minister to nations, and then the Lord said, I just need you to stay with your family for a year and not do anything. Could you do that? The difference, I say the line between men and boys, women and girls, is the ability of a prophet to close their mouth and not necessarily open it. It's easy to talk. It's easy to prophesy. It's really hard to shut your mouth and be quiet and sit when he asks you to do that. So, man, that was fantastic. Man, I love that too. I could go on the topic of family. I have this, we preach at some conferences called Cultivate Revival, where we talk about historic revival, we talk about modern, and we talk about the future stuff. But I have a message called Cultivate family cultivate revival, that if we actually are seeing this on a real level, then our children will actually know the power and presence of God, and our spouses will as well. So if we want to see revival in the nation, start at the home. You don't need a platform. You don't need people. Like, you have the capacity to change the world by investing in them rightly. And it's super rad. Let's shift gears a little bit and get wild with it. Let's talk about Donald Trump, okay? And specifically, I know that could be a can of worms. So you are not just a prophet on a local and regional level. The Lord has given you the opportunity to speak into this nation and nations. What I'm really wanting to do in some of the upcoming schools and training, I love introduction to prophetic, but I want to actually have the opportunity to train people with a prophetic office call on their life. And there's just not a lot of that out there right now that has much rooting and grounding in it. So for someone who has had those doors open to them, could you explain what is the process when the Lord begins to speak to you about things that deal with nations? How do you know when to release, or if you should release, or is this my place? Because with the internet out there, there's a multiplicity of errors that we see, and that's okay. People error, but it's better, if we could understand and somebody could speak to the issues. Who knows? I think that it would actually help people. So explain some of your process with some of the words that you had regarding Donald Trump as a president, this, that, and the other, and how you navigate when to release and how to release, and then dealing with the kickback from, I did what you told me to do, God, and people are mad.
Yeah, that's a great question. I tell people I started dreaming when I was 9 years old. That's when it kind of all began for me. Slept with a tape recorder by my bed, even before I was a teenager. Would get words for people, for leaders as I grew into a teenager. Things started coming for the nations and things. I would say probably just in over the last 10 years, I have released a lot of national prophecies for the United States, Hillary Clinton, Obama, Donald Trump, different foreign nations. Some of them have got more publicity than others. Obviously, that word about Donald Trump. I mean, I remember when that thing went viral, and I just had no idea, really didn't even know who he was. Our website that day got 1 million hits. It crashed the website. We were down for about a week, and then all the hate mail, that was a season. Even dreaming for most of my life, the amount of rejection I was really not prepared for. Yeah. I wasn't aware that there's even media warfare. I was used to different types, but I think a lot of people just think you type it in and then click send, and then there it goes. But there is a level of warfare, and honestly, for me, the degree of warfare that I experience personally, the degree of warfare that I experience after the word is an indicator to me of just how accurate it was. Yeah. Out of the bullseye national prophecies that the Lord has given me, and I would say 90% of them are dreams. That's the primary way. That's not really, I was sitting in my desk and had a vision. For me, I go to sleep and the Lord shows me things in real time, and I get up and I speak them out. I write them down. So knowing the timing of it, I think is important. I'm not a big fan of two things. One, just kind of shotgunning prophecies if you don't have a realm of authority or jurisdiction. Like, for example, if I had a word over Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, right, and it was a word of maybe direction or even correction, I would probably try to contact all the leaders that I knew in Mechanicsburg before I released that word publicly, so that the prophetic word could be used apostolically. That's really good. It's two different things. So sometimes, prophetic words that are more of on a regional, national basis, there needs to be some prayer and some fasting. I know for me, if I've got a major prophetic word, so just one more example, I shut down our ministry every December. I don't travel. I don't preach. I don't pray, I don't prophesy, I do nothing but fast and pray. And I asked the Lord, what are you saying to the body of Christ the following year?
Yeah,
and so I go into a season of preparation. I clean out my filter. I make sure that I'm hearing the Lord. So I think there's a time of preparation. I think that there's learning how to mobilize apostolically the word of the Lord, if you can, where you're releasing it to. And then I think that it's just, dealing with the rejection. I believe God's looking for prophetic messengers that can't be bought.
That's good.
They're like Micaiah in 1 Kings 22. They're going to prophesy the word of the Lord and the word of the Lord only. So, maybe if someone's listening right now and you're going through a season of rejection, I can tell you that whole Donald Trump thing was a stinger for me. It a lot of accusation, and I remember calling a spiritual father and just literally was weeping, saying they're saying all this about me, and I was looking for some comfort. And on the other end of the phone, he said, "What if it's all true?" Yeah, I'm telling you, man, that threw me for a loop. And he said to me, he said, "What is God trying to kill in you right now?"
My goodness.
What is even the false accusation? What is God after? And so from that phone call, I went on a 21-day fast and literally beseeched the Lord and said, "Lord, what are you using the rejection, the pain? What are you using this for?" And the Lord said, "Jeremiah, in order to promote you, you have to die to your reputation."
Oh, man.
And I realized that what was wanting to fight the accusation and you're this or that was my need to be seen, my need to keep a good public image. So I thank God for that. I believe God is so good that He could even use the false accusation of people to conform us and get us to take another step toward humility and brokenness.
Wow. That's amazing, man. That's super good. I love that. Oh, man. We got music coming in. This could only mean one thing. John, what does this mean?
This means that it is the time in the show where we ask deeply personal questions of our guests. So we're going to play a little game today with Jeremiah called Let's Get Personal. I should have had a roll-in song of Let's Get Physical, except let's get personal. Okay, so I've got a list of 10 questions that we're going to run through here and get to know you on a very personal level. Maybe a side that people don't normally get to see.
I'm nervous.
Hopefully,
I don't even know what these questions are.
Well, I just came up with them while y'all were talking.
Okay, good.
For the first half of the show there. So, all right, first question. What is your most embarrassing moment in ministry? Most embarrassing moment ever?
That's easy. I was preaching in Ohio, and I had my fly down the whole time, and I was preaching on holiness. And when I went to give the altar call, no one responded except for my father-in-law, who stood up and waved his hands during every eye close and said, "Hey, your fly's open." So
you got some holiness going on in your pants.
Zip that up during the altar call.
Nice.
Shame.
Oh man, I had a pastor at a church that I worked at once. He went to the bathroom and tucked his shirt into his underwear and didn't realize it, and somehow his underwear rode up over his belly, and it was a good moment. Okay, question number 2. What is the craziest or most bizarre thing that you've ever seen in a church meeting? Either spiritual or non-spiritual.
Well, what's coming to my mind, about 3 years ago, we had a lady come in dressed up as a bumblebee. And during the service, she would just kind of walk around and say, "Bzz, bzz, bzz." And we had to deal with that until security kicked her out. But
what
that
was
did not go over well with new people.
Yeah, what was her angle on the bumblebee?
She said she had a dream the night before that God was releasing honey in the church, and I'm not sure how she was connecting that. But.
Bless her heart.
We've seen some weird stuff here at Global as well.
Just a few things.
Yeah. Okay, next question. If God hadn't called you into ministry from an early age, what do you think you would be doing today if he hadn't called you?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I was a state runner-up and a state placer in wrestling. I wrestled since I was really young. I had full-ride wrestling scholarships in college, so kind of my dream was always to teach and be a wrestling coach.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's cool. I like that.
That's cool. All right, next question. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Cookies and cream.
Come on. I felt that down in my spirit. Chick-fil-A milkshakes. That's where it's at right there.
Okay, along the same lines with food, what is the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten in your life?
I lived in a leper colony in India for 6 months during my wilderness training of the prophetic call, and we would preach to these lepers, and they would make us this drink called lassi. Yeah. So it was buffalo milk, not cow milk, buffalo milk. It had, like orange juice. It has that pulp stuff. Yep. It had that kind of phlegmy stuff in it. They would serve it room temperature and then salt it.
I'm gagging.
We would drink that and turn around the corner and make ourselves vomit it back up. It was so gross.
Oh my gosh.
I've had that here in the States, and it's not bad. Like, they make a mango lassi. Like, I love Indian food. Yeah. But what you're describing sounds like authentically nasty.
Yeah, I'm nauseous right now. I might have to take a reprieve from the show to go around the corner and throw up.
Okay, let's stay on the food topic. What food do you hate the most?
Oh, wow. I hate to say it. I'm just not a big vegetable guy.
Okay.
I have a hard time eating vegetables.
But I don't want to eat it.
Do you have any secret talents that nobody knows about? Hidden talents? You already covered the wrestling thing. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Next question. Which habits that other people have drive you crazy?
I have a long list of these.
I do too.
Oh. Probably just, I get irritated when people chew gum and they smack it out loud. That kind of drives me up the wall. Yep. I'm kind of a neat freak, so I have a hard time with messes too.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can't sleep if my shoes are in the wrong space. They have to be right to left, lined up in a row. Even in hotels, as soon as I get there, I unpack everything. I hang my shirts finger length apart. That's probably too much information, but
That picture frame, those hooded strings, they are driving me insane.
I might be crazy or need deliverance. We'll find out.
Maybe both.
Okay.
Do you have any phobias? Any weird phobias?
Oh man, I do not like snakes.
How was your sleep?
Okay.
I don't like spiders.
No.
Those are two good ones.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the best vacation that you've ever been on in your life?
Wow. We take teams to Israel every year, and it's kind of work in some ways, but my favorite place to go and rest and hear from the Lord is definitely Israel, and just absolutely love it over there.
Yeah, I've never been. I keep trying to sneak in on one of our Israel trips with Pat Bach. Pat, if you're listening, you need some videography from
That's
Israel.
Right. Absolutely.
Hey,
some
you
drone
can come
shots.
with.
Okay.
Hey, there you go. Go
right.
Jeremiah. Drone shots. He's a master.
You need drone footage.
Drone. I would be scared to operate a drone in Israel.
That's true.
Like,
that thing would be shot down in about 2 seconds.
Like Iron Dome would come in and
Okay, all right. Here's our last question. If you could go on a road trip with anyone alive or dead, who would you choose and where would you go?
Is this more of a ministry question or just who?
It could be any ministry or non.
Yeah.
I'd love to go on a road trip with Leonard Ravenhill.
Oh, that is so weird that you said that. Like when we heard that when Justin told me we were interviewing you, I don't know that much about you, but he had sent me a clip of you of something on Facebook or something that I saw. I was like, that dude grew up reading Leonard Ravenhill.
Yeah.
I know he did. I did too.
It's one of my heroes.
I could sense it. I could sense it in the force.
Yeah.
when I heard you prophesy the first time, I was like, that dude's read some Leonard Ravenhill books, and I grew up on the same stuff. Okay. So Leonard Ravenhill, where would you go with Leonard?
Oh man, I'd probably go to a place that hated to hear the severity of God.
I love it.
Go to church and sit in the front row and watch them preach.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, just go and provoke some people.
Stir it up.
I would thoroughly enjoy it.
That's awesome.
That's really good.
All right, man. Thanks for playing. Thanks. What was the name of our game?
I don't even remember.
I don't remember what the name of it was. Let's get personal.
Let's get personal.
Yep.
Wow,
All right.
yeah.
Okay. Thanks, man. Back to you, Justin.
Awesome, man. Thanks for playing with us. That was fun. We like to mix it up in the middle, try to lighten it up. We'll go straight from like Donald Trump media warfare into meaningless trivia. But it's fun. We like to show the full circle of like, hey, prophets are people too. It's something I say all the time. So remember that when you're dealing with prophetic people, even though they carry an office and a weight and something that should be honored on their life, they're still people and they still have lives. So remember to befriend prophets too, not just for what they can do for you. That was free. That was a side note. These have been brought to you by, I don't know what.
Leonard Ravenhill.
Leonard Ravenhill. There we go. Thank you for that. So we'll segue into the next section. We might as well jump from trivia and humor into the fear of the Lord. Why not, right? Just pick back up where we left off. There's been this common theme, and even it's in Scripture, so it's not like a new thing, but it hasn't been championed or trumpeted by a lot of voices. And when you speak of balance coming back into the whole church, not just any particular move or denomination, I think of the fear of the Lord returning. And I have this thing that I say that the fear of the Lord will keep you holy. People worry about, like, how do I walk holy? Well, if you have a right view of God and a right view of yourself, it'll keep things in line. And I've heard you preach on it with great authority, and I love your line upon line, precept upon precept, whether directly or indirectly. Would you talk about the fear of the Lord and also how it coincides and works with grace? It's not in opposition, but the fear of the Lord is one of the graces of God. So could you speak to that for a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. And, I know that each of us has our experiences, with the different aspects of who God is. And for me, the fear of the Lord is very personal. And, I hate I always don't want people to feel like I'm being over spiritual or whatnot. But, Jesus Christ has appeared to me on 3 occasions in my life. And I would say for me, Jeremiah, the number one connector to the fear of the Lord is actually seeing him face to face. Yeah. And so for me, I have described the fear of the Lord as beauty that makes you tremble.
That's good.
And the Lord Jesus Christ is the most beautiful person that we have ever seen and that we will ever behold. And I think it's out of seeing, the eyes that burn with fire, it's love. I honestly, Justin, I struggle with people that can't bring them together because they can't do grace and the fear of the Lord, choose one, pick one, because as I've seen him and interacted with him, it's just one. You can't separate. There's that beauty realm. It's the love. It's the invitation. It's the affection. But it's also he's holy. Mm-hmm. He's totally other than. He's filled with light. I love the book of Revelation when it says, in the New Jerusalem, the Lamb shall be its light. I mean, no power bills, light bills. I mean, the light that radiates from his being. So sometimes I have this thing. I think maybe people think I preach with authority or whatever on the fear of the Lord because my heart is grieved. I think a lot of times when I get around different folks that, I say, Jesus is my homeboy. He's a friend, he loves us. But again, in my heart, I'm like, but have you seen him?
Yeah, come on.
They haven't. But if you've seen him, you wouldn't be living loosely. You wouldn't be cursing and getting hammered drunk and all this different stuff. It's just there's a place of encounter. I think I have a heart. I don't want people to get caught up in legalism, feeling like it's all about rules and regulations. I think it's out of an encounter of really seeing him that we embrace all of who he is. And then I think for me, the last thing that I would say is what really did it for me besides encountering him is one day reading John 17 when Jesus is addressing the God and he says, Holy Father.
Yeah.
He doesn't say holy, and he says, Holy Father, I have kept them in thy name. So he marries holiness and the fatherhood of God.
That's good.
I truly believe that I talk a lot about the orphan spirit in this generation, and I think that the orphan spirit is one of the main enemies of getting a generation to see the fear of the Lord and the grace of God. Yeah. And I always tell people, you have an orphan spirit when you receive correction as rejection.
Yes.
And so I believe that a lot of folks, when they hear the fear of the Lord, they hear repentance, if they're not secure in the Father's love, if they don't know that he's for them, not against them, when they hear the fear of the Lord, they start taking it as he doesn't love me. Rather, no, because he loves you.
Absolutely.
Because he's good, he has to instill in you a healthy fear of who he is and to walk in his ways. So that's a little bit for me. It's the personal encounters, and then it's not he's a sugar daddy and it's Holy Father. It's both.
No, that's stellar. It's a beautiful description. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I believe it is one of the things. It's a predominant. The fear of the Lord will return to the land, and it is that he does, like those he loves, he chastens. That's actually a prerequisite for sonship. If you can't endure chastening, correction, rebuke, scourging, even some translations, then you're not a legitimate son or daughter. So it's actually evidence that when we endure those things, we're legit, and that's super cool. I love that. I'm gonna probably just ask you one more question, and then we'll close out here, man. Thank you so much. This has been a blast. I've really enjoyed getting to do this. I think the people watching, listening are going to love it as well. So if you're watching, listening, make sure that you check out Jeremiah on everywhere that you can, his website, Facebook, Instagram, all of that good stuff. I want to ask you this question because you are one who's traveled to nations. This greatly affected me personally. Sometimes you have you have perspectives or you have ideas that are just theory, and then sometimes you have experience that changes your theory. And you have a practical, like, I've got a book knowledge of something, but then when I try to work it out in my life, it's different. When I started traveling to nations, I recognized that the gospel that's preached in North America doesn't always work everywhere else. And then I realized, hey, there's maybe some problems in the gospel that we're preaching a little bit. Has your traveling to nations affected the way that you minister, prophesy, etc.? And if it has, what did that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd love to just share real quickly. So a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, I was in a Moe's burrito place here in Lakeland, and there was a Spanish guy and his family that had walked in the door, and I immediately got a prophetic word for him, went over, started talking to him. I laid hands on him in the Moe's burrito line. He was slain in the spirit in the restaurant. They're like trying to call 911 thinking he's having a seizure. He gets up off the ground and says, hey, do you have a business card? I give him the business card, and 6 months later he tells me, he emails me and says, hey, I'm a mega church pastor down in Peru. Whatever that was, I want it. And so I get invited down to this church of 60,000 people.
Oh my God.
I mean, huge place. And I get there and I immediately realize there's a hunger there, but here's the thing. This guy felt called to the wealthy in Lima. So I've probably done like 20 mission trips, poverty, orphanages. I mean, really, and I always thought to myself, wow, they're really hungry for God. And the reason why they're hungry is because they're poor.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward, I'm down here in Lima, doctors, lawyers, and the hunger is unbelievable for the power of God, for the prophetic word of God. So I go down there, and I've been going down there in January of every year, the last 5 years. But I mean, we're talking massive outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And how this shifted me is I began to say, wow, Lord, how can, it's like, you go to their prayer meetings at 5 in the morning and there's Bentleys, Beamers, I mean, they're all rolling up gold jewelry. And I'm like, wow, these people are hungry. They have possessions, but they're still hungry for the Lord. And the Lord spoke. Sometimes we think in America, well, if people are poor, if they get rid of their stuff, they're hungry for God. Clearly, those people in Peru have figured out how to steward hunger and desire for the Lord while having material possessions. So that was like a real practical God encounter for me, where now in America, when I preach, I always say maybe those who have the most should be the most radical worshipers, because they have the most to be thankful for. So that's an encounter that I've had that really changed me going to the nations. And then just lastly, God can move with lots of people. I think, when you go overseas, so a lot of these churches I preach in that are big, time is not an issue. They love the power of God. In America, a lot of times the bigger the church, the shorter the services. The bigger the church, the more seeker-friendly we have to be. And you just don't find that in a lot of large churches around the world. So those are two things that I've learned. Man, I love those. Those were I really love that. That's awesome, man. I love seeing hunger in any people group. I would say that I can agree with you on some of that, because I've been introduced to some of the wealthier people in the world. We have some people that are billionaire status that run in some of the circles, and they are hungry, passionate pursuers of God. And when they get a hold of the kingdom message, they literally, the Bible tells us we're supposed to disciple nations. And if we have a poverty mentality, we'll never be able to do that. God can move in wealthy communities as well. So thank you for saying that, sharing that. This will be the last question. We always close with this one, because it is the Young Prophets podcast, because we are encouraging people to hear the voice of God and try to expose them to different prophetic voices. I wanted to ask you, what do you see ahead on the horizon? Like next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, what do you see God doing? You can pick any genre. It can be the church. It can be the world. What has he been speaking to you about long term? Yeah, I think, long term for me, I'm gonna go back to the word, probably in the church realm. I think it's in Isaiah 60. I think we're entering days of glory and crisis, light and darkness. Again, I don't think we have to pick one or the other. I think things are going to I think we're entering into the greatest days and the darkest days. I think that you're going to see them. The Lord told me, and I know it's strong, but the Lord told me we're going to see a harlot church that will rise and marry itself to the world. But also going to see an army that will rise and marry itself to the man of war. And so I think that you're going to see in some areas of the church a total marrying to the world. In other areas of the church, there's going to be an army that's going to rise. I'm calling them lighthouse churches and ministries that are going to be beacons of hope and truth in this generation. So I kind of see a chasm, if you will. I see light, I see glory, I see lighthouse churches, but I also see a falling away as the scriptures, and I think there's never been the most urgent need, I believe, in the nation right now is for real prophets to rise. Agreed. That are Genesis to Revelation, full counsel of God. The church has to get ready to receive the dirge and the dance. We have to grow in maturity. So I'm excited. I'm filled with hope. And I believe that fathering is the greatest need of the hour. We've got to have a multi-generational father walking with sons and mothers walking with daughters. Come on, man.
Man, I'm stirred now. I can't end on that note. No, it's fantastic. Thank you for sharing your heart, your perspective, what the Lord's been sharing with you. Man, I have had a blast on this. This has been good. I hope it's not the last time. We're going to have to figure out a way to do like part 2 with this. I hope you guys watching and listening have enjoyed this as much as I have. Go check Jeremiah out on multiple multimedia platforms and see where he's at. If you have the opportunity to go where he's at, be in one of his meetings. We've enjoyed having you. Pay attention. I'm Justin Allen, and we're out for today. We'll see you next time.